I'm very pleased to have on stage 5 very committed and passionate speakers. Marie-Claire Daveux, you're Chief Sustainability Officer and Head of International Institutional Affairs at Kering. Mil, you're President and founder of Mara Partners, which is a consulting institute working with large groups, but also UN organizations and governments to promote female leaderships to better address climate change and social major challenges. Alexandra Part, you are Chief Corporate Social Responsibility and Sustainability Officer at L'Oréal, and CIS 217 General Manager at L'Oréal's Foundation. Laurence Pesset, Head of Corporate Social Responsibility at BNP. You also oversees BNP's sustainability environmental strategy. And Patricia Ricard, you are President of the Paul Ricard Oceanography Institute. You are also spokeswoman of Ocean and Climate Foundation and a recognized expert in biomimicry. So here at the Women's Forum, it's clear that G stands for gender, but it could also stand for green. And this is the conviction that you all share with the same sense of urgency. And indeed, every day, facts illustrate the climate change with floods, with hurricanes, with global warming. And this leads to migration, to emerging diseases, to poverty in the agricultural sector and so on. And this impacts mainly the women. And it prevents them to be well educated and to be empowered. And this is also why climate change requires, with urgency, mitigation and prevention actions. And we already know, all of us, that the ambition to meet the Paris Agreement targets is also very high, already very high. And it's not only a call for technological innovation, but it's a call for a dramatic, a radical shift in our behaviors, and it's also a call for more collaborative actions. And this is what we are discussing today. And then the major question for all of us is how women can better contribute and benefit for climate change initiatives. I will start with you, Marie-Claire. For years, you have been highly committed to ecology, both in the public and private sector. Could you share with us how you see the women's role in that area and how better integrate climate change initiatives and gender-inclusive initiatives?
So first, good afternoon, everyone. So good afternoon, everyone. First, I would love to start saying that because, as you mentioned, I come from the public sector, I think it's really key that public sector and private sector work closely together if we want really to tackle one of the most important issues of our century. I could say the same for biodiversity. Today it's climate change, but I could say exactly the same for biodiversity. After, I think, without speaking about gender, when you are thinking about ecology, ecology needs transparency. So the first thing for me, you have to understand that where your impacts are if you want to act with efficiency. One of the most important impacts, and it's true for all the company, for all the sector, is coming from the upstream in supply chain. For instance, extracting raw materials. So for me, it's key, data and knowledge. The second thing, it's also the fact about life cycle analysis. Life cycle analyses are really key to really integrate, to compute impacts from both upstream and downstream. And today, when you are thinking about how the decisions are made, we can say that only few decisions are made based on life cycle analysis, and fewer are based with appropriate measures to really reduce our environmental footprint on ecosystem. After inclusion, you are speaking, and I will come back to the two topics, and I think when you are speaking about inclusion, it's also key to think about transparency, and if you want to have inclusion, you need to have all this kind of information. Of course, the other topic for me, which is very important, and when I mix public and private sector, perhaps after we will have the time to speak about my company, but I think we have to move the tax system, and we have to move the tax policy to better integrate and to push ecology, circular economy, but also efficiency. And at the same time, to push people and also to push company to really adopt and to put at the heart of their strategy the environmental side. And at the same time, to discourage companies and people to produce waste, wastage, and also inefficiency. And then for me, the last pillar when we are speaking about climate change, it's also to say that when you have reduced at maximum your impacts, you have made all the efforts really to be at the minimum, innovation is becoming key. And innovation can then develop foster toward a better world, a more sustainable world, and you need to find disruptive innovation really to change the paradigm. But the first key, it's really about that. And the last things, when you are speaking about inclusion, my last word will be about the fact that for me, when we are speaking about inclusion, we have really to involve everyone, and at the same time, really to think about fair and equity. So it means we have to pay attention, and we have to find also solution to be sure that the most vulnerable people, the most vulnerable audience, can continue to have access to what we can call essential services, essential goods, because we have also to pay attention to continue to have this equilibrium. And link with your question about gender parity, I only say the fact that I think that if something happens with climate change, and when you see the consequences today of climate change, and above all what will happen if we don't change our way of working and our way of doing, we know that women will be the first audience which will have the impact. So for me, it's more a question of impacts. After, when you are thinking about how we can tackle this issue, for me, like for many topics, we have really to work together, men and women, and above all to act.
Marie-Claire, could you give us some concrete examples of initiatives that you have also promoted at Kering?
Alors, at Kering, what we try to do, it's really to have a pragmatic approach. So with the same way of thinking. First, we want to know where our environmental impacts are. So we have developed a specific tool called our environmental profit and loss account. It's a way to measure our environmental footprint and giving to this impacts a monetary value. And what is very interesting with that, we were able to identify that over 93% of our impacts were linked in the supply chain, but we are not, I will say, specific. And when you are speaking about carbon emission, they are linked with what we call tier 4 and tier 3. So it means cattle farming, cotton farming. So you can imagine very far away from the designer and the design team. And to be honest with you, when you have to speak, so perhaps it's a women ability, but when you have to speak with a designer about cattle farming, the fact that the cow emits some methane, it's not obvious for a designer. You have a gap cultural. I think it's not gender cultural gap, but it's more with the background. And after we have taken strong commitment, we want to reduce by 50% our carbon emission by 2025. And to be sure, it's not only speeches, because perhaps you know, but our chairman and CEO, François-Henri Pinault, is really involved in the sustainability journey. We try to develop specific programs. So I won't mention all the programs, but for example, from the raw materials, we try really to put in place for cashmere, for leather, so we go to work with the food industry. For cashmere, we source our cashmere in Mongolia. For the processes, we put in place specific process for tanning, so it's a metal-free tanning process. So we are able to reduce by 30% our consumption of energy. I forget to mention that, but I think it's a good driver in the company. We have also defined a science-based target, and we were the first company in the CAC 40 to define it. And the last thing I would like to mention, it's about innovation. I told you a few minutes ago that innovation was really key. We try really to invest in startups which are able to show us disruptive innovation. So it's, for example, how we can remove leather and use mushroom leather. How can we use classical leather but with a leather grown in a lab? So it's quite disruptive. How we can do really circular economy. So we have invested in startup like One Again. So I don't want to be too long because my colleagues won't be happy. But I encourage you, if you want to know more about our commitment, to go on our website and of course to share more with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marie-Claire. It's more a holistic view, in fact. Huh? Okay, thank you very much. Going to Laurence, how the BNP CSR strategy embraces gender policy, equality and sustainability.
Good afternoon, everybody. So at BNP Paribas, we took very serious commitment on both issues, gender and climate change. For example, in gender, we are very proud to have our CEO being a thematic champion of the He4She UN program, which means that he advocates in favor of gender equality internally and externally. And on the climate change side, we have made financing the energy transition our priority, which means that we decrease our support to fossil fuels, so the most emitting sources of fossil fuel, starting by coal and oil sands and non-conventional shale gas, but also that we increase very significantly our financing to renewable energies, to energy efficiency, to smart mobility, smart real estate, and we invest also in innovative startups which contribute to accelerating the energy transition. But I think the biggest challenge is to link both issues and to make sure that when we finance a transformative environmental project, it also has a positive impact on the most vulnerable, among which women. So why do we pay a specific attention to women when we finance those kind of projects? First, because they are victims of climate change. We know that 80% of the people displaced because of climate change are women. And also because they mostly rely on natural resources for their living. And as caregivers in the family, they are in charge of providing water, food, energy, be it wood or charcoal. So they are really at the forefront of the impacts of climate change on their day-to-day lives. On the other hand, they are very positive agents of change because they really see the added value to see things changing. So it's key for us to consider women in this kind of projects because they should be the beneficiaries of the improvements, but also because they will be instrumental of the success of the project. Maybe I could give you 2 examples. As a company, we are carbon neutral, which means that we reduce our CO2 emissions. We source our electricity from renewable sources, but we have some emissions that we can't reduce. So we compensate. So compensating means that we fund projects, carbon offsetting projects in emerging countries. For example, we have one. We are funding with the Good Planet Foundation. It's in India, and it's a very poor rural areas where women and children are in charge of collecting wood several times a week in order to be able to cook the food and to heat their houses. So it's a burden. It's time consuming. It destroys the forests, first increasing climate change, and it has also very negative effects on the health of the family because it's very polluting. So the target of the project is to finance and help women using the cattle waste in order to produce biogas. So it will have a lot of positive benefits on the environment and also on women, because women become the owners of the biogas tankers. So that's an example of a win-win project on the environmental and for women also. Another one, which is bigger, because I think we'll be talking about scaling up all these nice examples. It's a sustainable finance facility we are structuring. It's also in India, but a lot of things are happening in India. It's called Zero Budget Natural Farming. It's something we are doing with the United Nations and with the state of Andhra Pradesh. And the purpose is really to transform the way they do agriculture in this state and to help them transforming to sustainable agriculture without pesticides, without fertilizers. It's a massive project because it's Andhra Pradesh and they have 6 million farmers. So it will require $2.5 billion of financing. And for the first phase of the project, the head farmers who have been selected, 85% of them are women, because they are the most prone to change. So I think there are two very
positive. Maybe a next question, quite specific to you in banking sector. We have a conversation during the Daring Cycle workshop around the access to finance. How do you see the innovative financing benefiting to women?
So it's a very interesting subject, and it's something we consider in all the different projects we finance, and especially when we do microfinance, because we finance microfinance institutions in 17 different countries, and we've been doing this for 30 years, so we have quite a lot of experience. And most of the beneficiaries are women, and it really has a massive impact, not only on the level of living of the women, but also on the family, on the children. The children go to school and stay at school longer. So it's something which is really transforming for the society at large.
Okay, thank you very much, Laurence. To you, Mel, now, you are really convinced that major social challenges requires more women in the driving seats. Mm-hmm. Why and what does it take to have more women in the leadership to accelerate those sustainability actions?
Great. Thank you, Marie. First, I would say I'm a huge advocate for women in all seats, not just driving seats.
Okay.
So. But you're right, women's leadership definitely at the top in government and companies, the UN and all bodies. By the way, I think it was today, Rwanda hit 69%. They've always been the highest in the world recently, but their parliament is pretty impressive. But the work that I do is actually from the very bottom of a global supply chain all the way up into government. And the reason for this is that there is research, obviously, we've talked about, that women are disproportionately the victims, as are children. But I prefer to think about why we are disproportionately the solution. And the reason I say that is that if you set aside the research on climate and you set aside research on women's rights, and you focus on what I like to call the business case, or quite often business school research, having women at all levels of a team, and by team, I mean government, team can be the UN, team could be a corporation, small or large. If you think of team, having women and men working side by side delivers gains in innovation, It delivers longer term gains to negotiation, so any agreement that's reached is more durable. You get gains in team performance, so the team outcome tends to be smarter. So you see where this is going. So the magic sauce, or the what happens is, if you think about what problem you're solving, and in this case we're solving for climate change, you would want innovation, you would want durability, you would want intelligence. So I find that if you're I work with Fortune 500s, governments, and large nonprofits. I come in from the front door of, this is good for your business, this is good for your people, and this is good for your organization, not the victim lens.
So what kind of soft skills does it require most?
Soft skills for the organization?
Yes, to try to work with complementary skills.
Yeah. Well, funnily enough, those complementary skills are the things that research also shows women have more of. Better listening skills and so on. And this is not me saying it. This is actually what the research says. But I think for people who are just starting out in this journey, or who may say, well, my company doesn't do anything on climate change. What's exciting is that there's a second part of the story, which is, funnily enough, if I asked you all, what's the number one solution to climate change? I'm pretty sure you're going to say something that I would call male, like technology, green this, green that, porous pavements. But it turns out that women's and girls' education is the number one solution. So for the soft skills, I say the soft skills are the top skill to have.
Okay, thank you, Mel. And this is a perfect transition for you, Patricia, with a conviction, a genuine conviction to promote interdisciplinarity as well as nature-based solutions to end up with not only innovative techs but also innovative solutions to match to meet the climate change targets. Could you please elaborate a little bit more and give us a concrete
I
experience?
can't resist at answering your question. If you ask me what's the best tool for climate change, I will just answer life, preserving life, because life's doing all the job. And that's where maybe we can find to have a new shift between, I wouldn't say male and female, because I like men and women being seated all over the car. So, and I think it's great when we still stay together, because we're making life by staying together too. So I think that's more about feminine values or masculine values. And it's true that technology could be more a masculine value than biology. Just imagine if today you're around the world in a very high position in a bank or in a company or in an institution or in a political adventure, you probably had a very, very good education. You've been to a very good school or university, and you have absolutely not learned biology or chemistry. Maybe physical if you're an engineer, but you don't have the three science, the main science to understand the big biosphere we're living in are biology, chemistry, and physical. And for such a long time, we're just being behind mathematics and physics. And mathematics is great. And so now today we have such an amazing world of IA, of transhumanism, of drones, of going back to the moon. I mean, we have made so much great toys, and those toys need so much electricity. But still, who's doing the big job? It's the biodiversity. The biodiversity provides food, the biodiversity stores the carbons. Every time you talk about someone who's talk about climate change, he said, we are going to lower our emission. I never heard someone said, oh, we are going to improve the ability of the nature to store the carbon. Actually, we need two. We need both, because 3 degrees is really, really a lot. So if you really want to come back to the 1.5 survival limit, you better start helping the biosphere to be so. So today we really have to move from what I call the green economy to the blue economy. Green economy is just business as usual, but just a little bit worse or a little bit better. You don't change anything on your process, on your strategy, on your mindset, and you just try desperately to change your fossil energy supply to sustainable energy. Those companies are going to die. Because transition is changing your mindset, changing your process, and using the transition to create a better and more efficient. And you can use the inspiration of nature to have all those ideas. The blue economy is very, very unusual business, but so much greater. So that's a shift, and that shift requires feminine values. Today you don't need to make big stuffs. You know, men likes to do big stuff, big dumps, big plants. I mean, I've been to Africa on a fishery UN convention, and they all wanted bigger boats, bigger nets, bigger farms. I mean, they want big. I mean, it's just like they're going to lose their honor if they just open a small plant or a small farm. I mean, so the size matter. We have to downsize, ladies. It's important. I like this one. Okay, sorry. And so we need small. We need to share. I mean, we need to share. We have an amazing task. We have to make proof of concepts, educate, train, and make it happen. So we really have to share. That's great. Women can talk to everyone. I mean, we are talkative. We are collaborative, and we like being together. That's another feminine value. And then we have to have empathy. Because empathy, if you don't have empathy, you will not feel the nature. Why save a bee? Why save a tree? If you don't have that minimum empathy for life, it's got to be a harder job. And then you have to look at nature like if it was just a beautiful book you need to learn. Because since today we have used nature as tools, as materials. But today there is information in nature, and that's biomimicry. Mm-hmm. So when I said no more technology, I said no more big technology, and we need more agile technology to share, store, and provide all that knowledge, which is really embedded in the nature. And I think that's a very feminine approach, because when you go to labs, when you get to the biology department, women are thousands.
And how do you see the financing of those kind of blue initiatives?
Well, as we do in Pernod Ricard, and I want to just ask all the ladies from Pernod Ricard to raise their hand, because look at them. See, so we do have some women in Pernod Ricard. We have Anna Malmöke, CEO of Absolut Vodka. You run a company with biomethane. I mean, you use the farmers' cows, and there's a very nice collaborative platform, and that plant doesn't use fossil fuel anymore. Ricard, it's the Institute Oceanographic Paul Ricard. Everybody understands that a company should have a very nice contemporary art action foundation. Why only the cultural patrimony? What about nature patrimony? I mean, today we need to conserve biodiversity. I mean, we can't repair it. Okay, it's terrible. I don't want to say that, but we have done so much for contemporary art, for human culture. It's time to work a little bit on nature, and most of it. It's very important to give scientists the creativity chance. In the Institute Paul Ricard, all the thanks to Société Ricard, who provides all the 60% of the financing, and then we have public findings too, so it works well, public and private. But then the scientists, they can. Basically, they can play by imagining solutions. Those solutions today, if I talk about that doing, I mean, said, okay, that's like ridiculous, or that's funny, or that, oh my God, that's dangerous, and then it becomes obvious. Today, we are trying to raise fish without out of the seas using insect flowers, and the thing is that we want to make a farm where at the end we're going to put more fish in the seas, and the new fisherman will be a man who raises fish, give it to the clients, and then put more fish in the seas. Taxi drivers 150 years ago in London were using cars and horses, and today they're using a motorcycle and helmets. So we have to do different, and we have to just think that life is the only thing we can really leave to our children.
Okay, so let's there observe and imagine.
Exactly, and dream and have fun.
Dream and have fun.
That's where you're more creative.
Okay. Then for you, Alexandra, it's clear that L'Oréal is promoting a number of successful programs. How do you see the level of changes considering the climate change programs that you have?
Yes, I think I'll try to make the part about perhaps L'Oréal as short as possible, and then try to speak on the issue a little bit. So at L'Oréal, it's true that we got very early involved in the gender and climate debate for two reasons. for our results in carbon emission reduction. We have reduced our carbon emissions by 73% from a 2005 baseline in our industrial activity, which makes us one of the most performing companies in the world in carbon emission reduction. And we have a gender balance within the company in the highest level positions. And so these two issues together made that, these two successes made that we got really very interested in the issue of gender and climate. So I think what the two issues have in common, that is that we are talking about this now for quite a while. You know, we are talking about the added value of women in every company, institution for 25 years. I have had the same arguments 25 years ago when I started to work on gender equality. We are talking to people about climate change, saying, people, you have to be aware it's the planet is going to survive. It's us who might not be here. And so I think, unfortunately, the narrative, we really have to question ourselves altogether about the narrative. How do we get people on board? Because I have kind of the impression that we are a little bit repeating, and then we find ourselves always all together, and we all agree. And we have, obviously, a democratic problem of bringing people on board to the conviction that yes, it's about women in leadership positions who are going to contribute to the solution. And yes, we have to tackle climate change in a way that is disruptive, because otherwise we are going to disappear. And so these are things that we are telling all the time. So I think perhaps we also have really to work on the narrative, on how we are going to tell the story. And I think what we are not telling enough is that the life and the world we are going to build through women and a sustainable way of living is a more beautiful world for everybody. So it's not just a more beautiful world for women, it's not just a more beautiful world for nature, it's a more beautiful world for all human beings, for non-human beings. And so I think this is really an important part of it. The story we tell is frightening, it's not aspirational, it doesn't make people come on board. And I think this is something that we really try to work on, and I think we all have together to work on that. What is the future we want, and why this is the best future that people can have, and what is the role that sustainability and women play in this. And we are, and myself too, very often, you know, I go out there and say, are you aware of the future we are heading to? You know, because for me it's so obvious that it's going to be horrible, that I think people have to become aware and immediately follow and get motivated and on board. And actually that's not what is happening. You know, people say, oh yeah, that's horrible, and then 24 hours later they go back to business as usual and to life as usual. So we have to change our narrative, and I think this is an important part. And then of course we have to use all the tools we have used for gender equality, also for gender and climate, because we know how it works if we want to promote women, and why we need to promote a female perspective on climate change. It came out in all your interventions. So women are going to be touched on more, but they are also part of the solution. We have seen it with the negotiation of the climate agreement. Let's not forget that Cristina Figueres and Laurence Toubiana have been the two operational women of this, and perhaps we would have never had the climate agreement of Paris without these two women. We know that women are going to jobs. Even we are having a program which is for women in science for 20 years, and luckily we see more and more female scientists coming, working on issues related to climate change, biodiversity, well, all sustainability issues. So what we see also is that women like to dedicate their lives, their research to public interest. And I think what we have to do and what we can do as corporates, as can support this is, they just want to come up with solutions. So, and that at every level. So I can see this with our For Women in Science program at the highest level of scientific research. They work on climate issues. But we can also see that in our supply chain, with women working, harvesting, shea nuts, they are working on climate solution because deforestation is touching on them more and more, and they see that their daily income is disappearing. So we have to work and support the solutions wherever they are. And what as companies we can do is we see this throughout our value chain. We see it in different developing countries, we see it in our workforce, we see it in the programs we support. So everywhere we have to use the tools that we learned in companies, like promoting role models, enable solution, give training to women, leadership training. Nowadays, with the foundation, we give leadership training to all young women scientists who receive a fellowship, because we think that this way we can accelerate their impact. We help them to be part of the public debate, to have influence on public policies, to have informed public policies. So I think this is where, as individuals, but also as powerful, influential women, we can have our contribution, but also as companies.
Okay, thank you,
Thank you very
Alexandra.
much.
This is the point where we need to scale up our actions and connect all these programs. Did you have other tricks, all of you, around how to scale up our actions and to build up an ecosystem that address climate change, but also gender? Mil, you want?
Yes. Thank you. So as I said, I work a lot with Fortune 500 companies, and one of them is Mondelez, so the world's largest snack food company. They bought Cadbury. They used to be Kraft. Most people don't really always know the word Mondelez. So they have had for many, many years programs on the environment and deforestation on one side, and then they've had livelihood programs and women's empowerment on the other. So we've been working together to create an integrated, what I call pink and green, so that there's no program that isn't green or blue, I like the blue, or gender at the same time. In the specific example, we do a lot of work with microfinance also. And so we're using the microfinance infrastructure, so village savings and loan associations, well established. And then instead of women being trained to do things that are just random projects like soap making, we're having them do shade tree nurseries, so that those shade trees then go on to protect the cocoa crop, which I'm sure you know because you mentioned shea butter. These crops within 10 or 15 years could be decimated. All the tropical commodities are in big trouble. So that project delivers livelihood, empowerment, training, education, and climate. And I say we're out of time. If your projects don't do all of that at once, think again.
Okay, thank you, Mil. Laurence, do you want to add a word, or Patricia?
I think we become more powerful when we join forces. So I believe very much in innovative coalitions between different kind of players. For example, public and private sectors, big foundations, the UN, investors, NGOs. The most powerful projects and transformative projects we have in our pipeline are those kinds of projects which really unite different kind of players. And we can, as a financial institution, act as a bridge between all those players and become more powerful. So I think to scale up coalition is a very powerful solution.
Yeah, I think the world is together. When today the platform Ocean and Climate, when we started for the COP21, we were 5. Today we're 70, and basically we represent all the French and some European and American institutions of science of oceans. Being so powerful has made such a big difference. When we celebrate the 50th birthday of Institut Paul Ricard, we had a dream. We wanted to make a little Médicis Villa for young biologists. And I talked to Pernod Ricard, and they used their amazing network. And then up it was done. So using companies are real networks, because today we do have networks. I mean, we have a social internet, social. I mean, we have so much power to transfer the information, and most of what we need more is to show. I mean, we need little movies, we need little describing. I mean, we have to show to the people what's the next step, because that's the really problem. Because the world is it's just like, imagine we're all in a house. house and there's a fire and everybody is just crying fire, fire, and suddenly a voice said, come here, at the end, here's the way out. So we have the way out and we have to share it. So we have to use all what we can just to show what it is. How can you make it? And those solutions are not complicated. They're just different.
Okay. Alexandra?
Yeah, I would like to say this more from a general perspective of social change, and not just from a company's perspective. Even change happens also in a company in a quite similar way. So I think what we need to scale is a sense of urgency. And I think there is coming some sense of urgency in the moment. You know, I feel that everywhere around the world people are aware it's urgent, very urgent to change. So I think this is one part. The second part is what I said about the narrative. Then you need a vision where to go to. And I think this is also an important part. And I think the third one, so you need the urgency, the vision, and I think then you come to a tipping point. And I think where we can contribute, each of us, is to push faster to come to that tipping point where a society changes. You know, for example, 25 years ago, every bought eggs from chickens that were in cages. Nobody does that anymore. That's a tipping point, you know. Society completely flipped and said, this is not what we want anymore. You can see that on other questions in society too. So what we have to come is we have to push everybody and everybody who can contribute to this to come to this tipping point where we go to the other side, where we have solutions. But I think there is really an individual responsibility of everybody to contribute to that.
Okay, thank you. Maybe Marie-Hélène, you have a view on whether or not government have also crossed the tipping points. What do you think?
No, now I am not in government, so I would like to jump in what Alexandra was saying. I think now the diagnosis when you are speaking about climate change is very clear. So it's really the time to act. And for this kind of topics, I think also internally in the company, it's really very key not to have on one side men, or on the other side women. It's really important that we can work together. And perhaps, I fully agree with what Alexandra was saying, so perhaps I think in this kind of movement, for action, if we have a kind of call to action to say, I think women can take the lead of this movement, because now we have a great network, international network for women, and perhaps to underline that it's really time to act. It's also very time to act pragmatically. We were speaking about feminine values. Perhaps women are really pragmatic, so they can show that step by step. If not, you are not making the revolution every day. It's really your responsibility to move the company, to move in your private life. But really, step by step, you can change the paradigm, you can change the world, and I think for that, women are really good. Something that is not men and women, but for me it's very key, and we didn't speak about it. It's when you are about governance in a company. I think it's only the starting point, but it's very key to have at the level of the board some people who understand really the environmental issue. So I am not only speaking for climate change only, but for biodiversity, for resource scarcity, these kind of challenges. I think also from the top and from the board, it's really key to have people who are not only coming with a financial background to integrate the audit committee, but also people who can understand that in short term, of course, we need to have a great result. It's not at the level of caring that I will say money is not important and we don't pay attention to shareholders, of course. But I think also it's key to integrate in the board of directors some people who are able to see long term and to understand not only saying that it's important, but to understand perhaps more in detail, technically speaking, what does it mean for the company and for every sector.
Okay, thank you. Patricia, and maybe all of you then, considering the
and
time.
just maybe a little takeaway, because
Yeah.
you maybe all works
Yeah.
in companies. I think it's time that sustainability switch from CSR and go straight to R&D, and because it's a really high thanks to just share your R&D. I know it's just switching from a competitive world to a collaborative world. If you go several companies together on same field and join your forces to find the right solution, because it will be. We don't have more time to fight each other, and we really have to work together.
So cooperation and
Cooperation, that's a
competition.
very feminine value.
Okay. So maybe last words to give and leave the audience your very last call for action or a concrete takeaway to leave us.
I would say put more women in the decision-making positions, and things will change faster, because they have this feeling of the urgency to act. They like to change the way things are being done, and put women not only on the sustainability positions, because you see that there are already plenty of them, but in your core business activities, really to change the way things are being done and how we do business.
Actually, mine goes well with what you just said. It's that you put more women not just in decision making, but put them in absolutely everything at any level of the company. The reason being that even if they start out as, say, a community animator on a motorcycle, they gain enough confidence to run for office. And I've seen this. I've seen 18-year-old young women who were literally just working in the most remote communities in Africa. They then had the confidence to run for office within a few years. So put them everywhere.
Everywhere. That's fine. So Patricia, Laurence, Mille, Alexandra, and Marie-Claire, thank you very much for sharing with us your journey. You enlightened the past where we are, and inspire our own action. So let's go for action now. Thank you so much. Warm applause for our panelists. Thank you very much.